Hi, welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be my 10 before the end. So I saw this trend, or I guess a trend, on Instagram where people were talking about 10 books they wanted to read before the end of the year, and I was like, oh, I want to do this too. And so I did. I had 10 books I for sure wanted to read by the end of the year, and these are all 5-star predictions for me, and some of them are more like could be a 5-star, and some I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be really disappointed if this is not a 5-star. So that's what today's video is going to be about. And minor spoiler alert, I've already read one of these books and it was a 5-star read, and I'll get to that. I'll probably talk about that at the end. But yeah, and so today's candle of the day is from a company called Novel Wicks. I really like their candles. They smell really good. They're all like fictional themed. Like she has Sarah J Maas candles. She has, why is that the only one I can think of off the top of my head? But all of her other books have, candles have a theme. Like here's one that's not burning. This one's called Shh, I'm Reading, and I've actually burned this one almost all the way, but it smells good. And I like the tin, so I keep it. She does have different sizes, and next time I'm gonna get the ones that are in the jar size because I like the way that they look. This one that I'm burning is called Tall Dark. It's called Tall Dark. It doesn't want to focus. Tall, Dark, and Fictional. Yes, please. That's how I like my men too. And this one is Amber and Plum. And so the scent is, I get more of a, that's a good one. I get more, almost like a floral fragrance. I'm not sure if Amber is supposed to be a floral fragrance, but there is kind of a plum, like it's more subtle. But in any event, I do really like her candles. I feel like they're very fragrant. And then the other part I like is that when you first get them, they have glitter all over the top, and it's really pretty. So that's today's candle of the day. And then real quick, if you see me drinking something, I am drinking an energy drink that I don't normally drink. I do normally drink energy drinks. I like Alani. Oh my God, I could like live off Alani, but this is called A-Shock. It's because I don't have any Alani. So it's also 0 sugar. I wonder how much caffeine it has. 200. Yeah, perfect. Same amount as an Alani. So this one's called Swirl Pop. I did not buy this. It just happened to be in my fridge. Okay, it's not bad. I'll say that. I still prefer Alani. But it's like tangier than that. Okay, nobody joined this video to hear me describe an energy drink. So we're gonna get into the top 10. I'm gonna put it on the screen up here. I'll just flash what they are so you can see what I'm gonna be talking about. And again, I'm hoping that these are all 5-star predictions for me. Like I said, some of them are like, I'm gonna be disappointed if it's not a 5-star, and then others it could be a 5-star, and this is one of them that could be a 5-star. This is called Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is a dark romance book. It is about, and obviously I haven't read any of these, so I'm just going by what my assumption of the book is. This is basically about a nurse who likes looking at masked men online, masked, like, you know, a mask. Anyway, men online, and that's her like kink, whatever, everyone has one. And then she has one man in particular. She's like, oh wow, I really like him. And I think that they meet, and I think that that's what this book is about. And I don't think that he knows that she watches him and then he starts to like her. Maybe he does, I don't know. But I want to say the male main character is a serial killer of some sort. I feel like one of them kills people, and the reason I think that is because I know if you like Butcher and Blackbird, and that I think it's called the Ruinous Love Trilogy, you'll like this book. I liked Butcher and Blackbird. It was entertaining. The romance was like okay, and I feel like some of the stuff, like the ice cream thing, was just it was fine. Like, I feel like some of the stuff was like too over the top for what it needed to be. But I did really like, and oh, by the way, I listened to the audiobook of the second one, Leather and Lark. Oh my god, okay, the female main character, her laugh was super annoying, but the male main character, I could listen to his voice like all the time and be really happy. So yeah, this is one, Lights Out. I hope to like it. I will, again, hope to read it by the end of the year. You know, now that I'm like thinking about this and reading the back, oh, he does know that she follows him. So he does know that because he says one follower caught his eye. Anyway, I think that they do meet and that's what the book is about. But yeah, will it be 5 stars? This one is probably one of the most uncertain that I am about if it'll actually be a 5-star read, but I do think that I'm going to thoroughly enjoy it. So I'm excited for this. The next book is extreme, and these are in no particular order. I own all of these books. Lights Out, I think it's on Kindle Unlimited, but I own all of these books except one, and that is Phantasma. Well, spoiler alert, maybe I should just talk about that one after this one, but yeah. So moving on to the next book. This one is very different than Lights Out. This is Project Hail Mary. It's a science fiction book. It's, if you guys have seen, it's by Andy Weir. Yeah, that's how I'm gonna say it. He wrote the book that the movie The Martian is based off of, which I know is a popular movie. I saw it a long time ago, but it's so funny because there's a meme that goes around and it's like 1 hour here is 6 hours on Earth, and I ride horses and it's like every time I'm at the barn I'm like, oh, it'll only take an hour, and then it actually takes 26 hours of real life time. So I get time distortion. But anyway, so Project Hail Mary is a science fiction book. It's about an astronaut. He's the sole survivor on so there's a last chance mission to save humanity and Earth, and he was on this mission, and he is the last one that's left alive from the mission. And I think it's his story. It says, with the clock ticking down and the nearest human being light years away, he's got to do it all alone, or does he? So maybe there's somebody else in this book too. I don't know, but I've heard literally nothing but good things about this book. And I've heard that the audiobook is super good. And so I kind of want to do an immersion read. Libby, the Libby app that I use, doesn't have Project Hail Mary as an audiobook. So I'm trying to decide if I want to do an immersion read bad enough to get the audiobook, and I might. But this is a book that I wouldn't be devastated if it wasn't a 5-star read for me, but I think I would be pretty disappointed because I have really high expectations for this book. And a lot of people who have said do the audiobook, they say because it's very science heavy, but I have a scientific background. I have my degree in chemistry, and I don't use it in my current job anymore, but I have a science background. I enjoy reading about science. So we'll see. I've heard that it's entertaining and I hope to enjoy it. The next book is also a different book than the previous two I just talked about. This is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I know I'm like super late to the Quicksilver train. This book went, I don't know, do we use the term viral? Like, everyone was talking about this book. Everyone was raving about this book. And since then, I've seen some kind of less than positive reviews come out, basically people saying the book didn't live up to the hype. And I do feel like when books get really hyped up, it can almost create disappointment when you read it and you're like, oh, well, that wasn't as good as I was thinking about. So I wanted to give myself some time between when I heard how popular it was and when I read it, because I didn't want to be disappointed. I might also buy the audiobook of this and do the immersion read, because I've heard the guy's voice. I think his name's Kingfisher. Yeah, I could listen to him too, like all day long. You know what? I don't even know what this book is about. I know it's a fantasy romance. That's about it. But the devil is in the details. That's what the back of the book says. I've like thumbed through this book and have read the first like page or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I do like the writing style. So I also have to read this book by the end of the year, because as part of I set up like a reading journal at the beginning of the year, and I randomly like assigned challenges for myself, and one of them was to read the alphabet. So read a book that starts with every letter of the alphabet. and Q is the last letter that I need. And I didn't cheat at all because I made sure books, like if it was called like The Witcher, I wouldn't count that because it doesn't count as a W because it has the. So I was like very specific, and I'm really happy that I only have one letter left, and this is the book that I'm choosing for it. So it has to be read by the end of the year. And this is another one that, like, if it's not 5 stars, I'm not going to be devastated or even that disappointed. Like, I expect it to be at least a 4-star read. I'd be happy if it was 5. It has the potential to be 5 stars, even though I have no idea what it's about. But yeah, this is another one. Hey, like I said, I just pulled these books off the shelf. So switching genres to, I think this is a romance, but it's I think it's more than that too. This is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I've only read one other Emily Henry book, and I own like 5 of her books. And so that's like a personal problem I have, where I see an author like at Target or Barnes and Noble. I'm like, oh, I want to buy that book. And then all of their books. And yeah, that's what happened with Emily Henry. But the book I read by her was Beach Read, and I really liked that book. I read it early last year, so I don't entirely remember everything that happened. I remember it was 2 neighbors, and they were both authors, and they wanted to like switch genres and see who could write better in the other one's genre, and then they fell in love. This book is One Summer, Two Rivals, a plot twist they didn't see coming. I'll be the judge of that. So Nora, that's the female main character. She loves books, relatable. She's a literary agent, and she has a sister named Libby. And then she goes to North Carolina, and she meets a man, and looks like his name is Charlie. He's an editor, bookish. Oh, this looks fun. It would be a meet cute if not for the fact that they've met many times before and it's never been cute. So is this gonna be enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers? I love stories like that where they like, especially I love it in fantasy romance. Like that's my enemies to lovers. I will freaking die on that hill. Like I love that trope. Even if it's like, you've seen those memes where it's like, the person is like, oh, they became lovers after like 500 pages of reading about how they're enemies, and we're all supposed to be shocked, but nobody's ever shocked. But it's that like tension and the banter that develops between the characters when they're enemies, and then they slowly develop feelings for each other. I really like that. So the back of the book doesn't really tell you much, so I'm going into this one. Another thing about me is like, this sounds so weird, but I don't always, actually most of the time, I like to go into a book not knowing too much about it. I prefer to just get like vibes, like how I see other people talking about it. Like you can get a vibe from the back of the book even if you don't know what it's going to be about, just based on how the author writes. And I feel like this is going to be 2 kind of grumpy people that don't like each other and then slowly develop feelings for each other. So yeah, I'm excited to read it. And this is another one where I'm like, okay, if it's not 5 stars, I'd be pretty disappointed, but not like absolutely devastated the way some of these books. Like I would be pretty devastated about Project Hail Mary if that's not a 5 star. But the other ones, Quicksilver, Lights Out, we'll see. This is one that between we'll see and devastated, like I want it to be 5 stars, so we'll see. This next book, if this is not a 5-star read for me, I'm going to fling myself off a cliff, because this is Redeeming Six, so it's the 4th book in the Boys of Tommen series. I read Binding and Keeping 13 earlier this year and was absolutely enamored with that story. Those are going to be my top books of the year. I mean, there's other books in contention. Before I Let Go is one, and then the Boys of Tommen series. So I read Binding and Keeping 13, absolutely fell in love with it. I got the special editions, and I think I have the other special editions coming. It's all but been confirmed. I think it's a Christmas present, but we'll see. In any event, so this is Joey and Aoife's story, and this is the 2nd book in their story, and their story is quite a bit different than Johnny and Shannon's. I don't know how to describe it without giving too many spoilers, but Joey and Aoife's story is sadder. It's darker. Joey really struggles with addiction, which is something I can really empathize with. and he really struggled with that in the first book, and Aoife was always there for him, like always was by his side, even when she probably shouldn't have been. And the way that book ended, I'm really curious how this book is going to start and finish, but it also takes place kind of simultaneously. So Keeping Six, there's stuff in that book that happens well before Johnny and Shannon meet, and then I think as the timeline goes, there's going to be some congruency. So I think that we'll see some of Joey and Aoife's story that we saw in those books in this book, but I'm curious how it's going to end, especially knowing how Keeping 13 ended. And this is a thick book. Like, this is a lot of book. So I will be absolutely devastated if I don't give this book 5 stars. And sometimes when I have like really high expectations for a book, it's hard for me to actually pick up the book and read it because I'm so afraid of being disappointed. So that's kind of where I'm at for this book. It's not that I don't want to read it, but I'm like really afraid of how I'm going to feel about it. And also because it does talk about addiction, I do have to be in the right mind space to read that, which I think I'm okay to read about that right now. So I'm definitely going to try to read this before the end of the year. In fact, I have the house to myself this weekend, and so maybe I'll read this book because I'll have 3 days of uninterrupted reading time, which is absolutely unheard of for me. So you know, I think I'm going to read this book. I'm going to throw it to the side. Okay, we're down to 4 more plus the one that I don't own. This book is called Catch the Sun. It's by Jennifer Hartman. I love Jennifer Hartman. My first book I read by her was Still Beating, and I listened to the audiobook of that book and I loved it. I don't know why I didn't give it 5 stars because I think I gave it 4.5, and I'm not sure why. It might have just been missing like something, but I do think it also could be that I experienced it as an audiobook instead of a physical read, and so sometimes it's harder for me to get that 5-star feeling. But in any event, I love this author, and then so I read, or I listened to Lotus after that. That one was kind of mediocre for me, but then I read Older, which is right here, and I have a special edition of it too, and I adore that book. Like it's an age gap romance, and it had me sobbing at the end. I'm like, I didn't think an age gap romance would make me cry like this, but it was so good. And she has the best playlist for her book. I literally, anytime I hear Wonderwall by Oasis, I think of that book and those characters. Anyway, we're not talking about that book. We're talking about Catch the Sun. And so this is, I think, her newest book that came out. It came out earlier this year, obviously not a winter book. I got the sprayed edges because I did like a pre-order on Amazon. And I also think this is a YA, her first YA book. I could be wrong. No, it is. It says young adult on the back, which kind of makes me sad. So maybe it's not going to be as spicy as some of her other books were. Not that, the others weren't that spicy though, now that I think about it. I think she just builds really good sexual tension amongst the characters, and that's fun to read about. In any event, I don't think that this book is going to have that as much as the others. We'll see. But basically it's about, and I do kind of know what this one's about a little bit more than the others. This is about 2 children that knew each other, and then they were best friends, Ella and Max. And then it says life scattered them in different directions, forcing Ella to abruptly leave town. And so her brother apparently is on death row, convicted of a crime that shook the nation. And so I think at some point when the 2, Ella and Max, are children, they get separated for whatever reason. Maybe their families move apart, and then Ella's brother goes to prison. And so now she says she's like a shadow of herself. And so Max has a disabled father and a distant twin brother. And then Ella comes, it looks like Max never moved away, but Ella did. And now Ella comes back to town. And he is interested in trying to rekindle a friendship with her. And it sounds like there might have been something that happened. Perhaps he has something to do with her brother being on death row. I don't know. But it sounds really good. Oh, and I guess the main character in this book really likes like cream. I want to say it's cream. It's like strawberries and cream Dr. Pepper, I think. And anyway, I remember that because I saw it at the store one day as a sugar-free version, and I was like, oh, that reminds me of the book I've never freaking read. And I bought it and it was really good. So this is a book, I'll be disappointed if it's not 5 stars because I do really like this author. Jennifer Hartman writes really, she makes you fall deeply in love with the characters and then she rips your heart out and devastates you and then she pieces it back together. And I love it. The next book on this list, hang on, we need a drink break. Oh, it's just not Alani. The next book on this list is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I think I'm absolutely going to adore this book. I listened to Part of Your World. So this is the second book in a series of, I believe, interconnected standalones. So there's Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and then Just for the Summer, which I also want to read, but I know I'm not going to get to it this year. This book I know talks a lot about anxiety. I have issues with anxiety. I feel like the whole freaking world does. So I feel like always awkward saying that, but then when I interact with other people, I realize actually no, you have really bad anxiety and not everybody experiences that. So I think we see some of the characters from Part of Your World in this book. And I remember hearing about Yours Truly and everybody loving this book, singing its praises. And I wanted to read the books in order. I don't think you have to, but I wanted to. And not a lot of people talked about Part of Your World or the things I had seen. A lot of people were like, oh, it's okay, but this book's really good. And I loved Part of Your World. That was a 5-star read for me as an audiobook, which I was very shocked by. I remember going to Barnes & Noble and I was almost done with the audiobook and I'm driving, or not even almost done. I probably had like an hour left and I was driving to Barnes & Noble and I sat in the parking lot and I cried and finished it and just crying. Like, okay. I feel like I don't cry a lot in real life, or not real life. We're all in real life, but I feel like I don't cry a lot. That's not true. I do cry a lot, but like privately, and I don't really talk about that. But when I cry about a book, I will scream it to the world because I love reading a book that invoked so much emotion in me that it brought me to tears because I cared so deeply about those characters, I guess is what it is. So yeah, this book is about 2 doctors. One is getting divorced. She wants a promotion and then she thinks it's going to another doctor that she doesn't like. It looks like, it kind of looks almost like enemies to lovers, or like not enemies, but like, I don't really, like she has like an opinion of this man and she's like, I don't like you. And then it's like him changing her mind. And I actually think he's the one who suffers from mental health issues and anxiety in this book. But I've heard it's really good. Unfortunately, I do have a friend who hates 3rd act breakups, and so whenever she doesn't rate a book 5 stars, I know a book that I would think she'd rate 5 stars and she rated it less. I think it's because I think then that like indicates to me I know that there's like a dramatic 3rd act breakup. And like I know that happens in romance books, and sometimes, most times I don't really like it, but sometimes I can, if it's done in such a way where I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me, then I'm okay with it. So I'm hoping in this book, if and when we get to a 3rd act breakup, that it won't be that bad, because I'll be pretty sad if this isn't a 5-star read for me. 3 more books, 2 physical, 1 on KU that I need to check out. This book, this is Exodus. It's the 2nd book in the Ravenhood, or is it called Ravenhood? Yes, in the Ravenhood series. I think it's initially a trilogy, and then there's another book that came out at the end of the trilogy, like on a rainy day or something like that. So I heard really good things about this trilogy, and by the way, this is the indie edition. I know that they've been traditionally published now, and their books are prettier for sure, but I don't know if I'm going to love these books yet, so I'm not going to buy 800 copies of the same book. So I read Flock. I want to say I read Flock last year, like late last year, and I was reading that book and like 40% into the book, I'm like, what the F? Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on YouTube, probably not. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I don't know anything about this book. I wasn't sure if it was fantasy even. I think I started the book going into it thinking it's fantasy romance. It's not at all. So I was very confused, and then I started to realize, actually, I really like these characters, so I don't really care that I'm confused. And there's a scene, I think it's on a raft in a river. that scene lives in my head rent free permanently. And after that scene, I was like, okay, I love this book. And then I finished the book very quickly after that. And initially I was going to DNF, like for a long time. Like it took me a long time to read the first 20% of that book. And then after I got past that and I think about the 40-50% mark, I was hooked and I gave it 4.75 stars ultimately. And so that's a book about a girl. She has a rich dad. She moves to this city that's kind of poor. I think it's supposed to be like a Robin Hood retelling. And in Flock, it starts where she comes back because her dad kind of reminded me, I mean, her mom, it kind of reminded me of Twilight a little bit in the sense that this girl comes back to her hometown because her mom has met somebody and married him or is trying to marry him or something. And so she moves back with her dad, and her dad is a very rich businessman. And he runs this factory in this small town. And basically most people who work in the town work for him. And so he and they don't really like him. Like he's not a nice man, and she doesn't really like her father either. And so she also gets a job at the factory, and she meets this guy, and he has kind of this like weird club that she's like, what is this? It's very secretive, and he does a lot of weird stuff. Like they go for a hike one time, and he like takes her Apple Watch off. He's like, why do you need this? And he throws it on the ground and stomps on it, and basically goes on this like diatribe of how we don't need all the electronics and like extra things we have in our lives, and how we should be, you know, more generous with what we have, like spread wealth out across the population, I guess. It's been a while since I've read it, but essentially he was saying we live well above our means and we don't need all the stuff that we have. And so it was a really interesting it was an interesting read, and it was very smutty, and I loved it. And I've heard that this book is even better, and that it will make you cry and devastated. And like people talk about this book and they're like, your life is going to be changed. And I wasn't ready for my life to be changed just yet. But now I think I am. So I'd like to read this. I would like it to be a 5-star. I'll be disappointed if it's not, but not devastated. So I do have pretty high expectations for this book. The next book we're going to talk about is actually one that I've already read. And sorry if that's kind of cheating, but I did post this on Instagram like 2 weeks ago or something, like, 10 books I want to read before the end of the year. And this was one of them, and I said, okay, fine, I'm gonna read this book. This is A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stasia Stark. And I actually got this book for Christmas last year. I remember I asked for it and I got it, and I wasn't in the right mindset to read it. Again, it goes back to that I have really high expectations for a book and then I end up not reading it for whatever reason. So yeah, there was a quote in this book that I read. I saw the author posted it actually after the results of the election. And let me find it because I flippin' loved it. I was like, oh yeah, that's a quote that's going to make me want to read this book. Basically the premise of this story is that there is magic. This kingdom has magic, and apparently a long time ago there was a big war, and in order to keep the gods happy, the king of all the land has to take all the magic from everybody and he gives it to the gods. And then when you turn 25, you get a little piece of your magic back. And that's the story. Everyone fucking believe. Oh, here I go again. That's the story. Everybody believes it. You know, okay. And the king is very powerful, has all these methods because he takes the magic from you when you're born, and then he has ways to tell, like, if there's kids that were born that didn't have their magic, and then the population is supposed to also like tell on people, like if they see a kid who's didn't have their magic taken and grows up and, you know, whatever, now if they kept their magic, they get told on, essentially. And so this girl, she has magic and she is trying to hide it. And so her parents, her mom knows that she has magic, and her brother does too. And I think she's 23 in this book. So she, at the beginning of this book, so she has 2 more years before. And the way that it starts is essentially at the very beginning, she's found out that she has magic. And so she goes on the run and she meets this guy. His name is Lorien, and Lorien is literally everything to me. He rivals Wilder Hawthorne. Actually, this book gives me Blood and Ash vibes in a different way. Like, the plots are vastly different, but the characters are very similar and their interactions are very similar. And Lorien reminds me a lot of Wilder, and I think that's why I like this book so much too. The banter and the tension, he is so freaking funny. He is hilarious, and so is she. She just, they're both hilarious together, and the tension is so good. It's so good. But in any event, okay, this is a quote that I read. She meets this woman because there's like other rebels that she eventually meets, and I don't really think that's a spoiler because that's part of like the premise of the book. And the woman, she goes, because she's basically learning that the king doesn't have to hoard all this magic, that the king is doing it as kings do to make himself more powerful and to keep his power and to keep his subjects underneath him afraid because he has all this power. And so she's asking this rebel lady, she's like, why do people believe the king's lies? And how have they gotten away with it for so long? And this is what the author posted in her quote the day after the election. The woman, her name's Margie, she shrugged. Her expression was bleak. She said, how do you control a population? You keep the people poor and uneducated, tell them the same lie for centuries, and tie that lie to religion. Those people will believe you even when the truth is dancing naked in front of them, because to believe otherwise would mean their entire world has always been a lie, and that realization is too difficult for most people to take. So, yeah. That made me want to read this book because I feel like that's the world we're living in right now. 5 stars. I didn't like expect it to be 5 stars. I was reading it and there was a little bit of a lull. I think around like 60%, maybe 50%. It's hard to tell when you're reading the physical book, but there was a little bit of a lull. But like everything that happened before the lull and after the lull, I was like, you know what? Forget it. This is 5 stars. I love this book. I finished it. This is for me too, when books finish, like when I stay up super late trying to finish a book, it's usually a 5-star read for me because I like sleep. I like to try to be asleep. It takes me a long time to fall asleep too. So if I stay up till like 1 or 2 reading a book, it's going to take me an hour or so to like wind down and fall asleep. But yeah, super good. So I'm 1 for 10 on this list so far, and it was a 5-star read. I did start the next book. It's A Kingdom This Cursed and Lovely. Oh, and by the way, like 30% into this book, I bought all of the books. I was like, I'm gonna want physical copies. It is on KU. So, okay, and so that brings us to the last book that I'm going to talk about, and that is Phantasma. I don't have the book, so I will put it up on the screen. Phantasma is another one of those like viral books that I kind of wanted to put some space between myself and when everyone started talking about it. People say it's a dark fantasy romance, and it's very similar to Caraval. And essentially, you know, this is another one of those I'm not really sure what it's about, but I like the cover. I like the vibes it gives. I loved Caraval. I think that was like a 4.5 star read for me. I guess it's similar to Caraval, and these people are competing against each other in this games, I think. And the one rule is to not fall in love. So of course, there's going to be people falling in love, but I really hope that it's an enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers. I hope that there's tension and spice and witty banter. That's really what I look for. Like in a fantasy romance, enemies to lovers, tension, spice, morally gray male main character, grumpy male main character, like hates everybody except her. Yeah, that's what I like. I don't know why I am the way that I am, but so yeah, those are my top 10. Those are my top, no, they're not top. Those are the 10 books I want to read before the end of the year. In theory, do I think I'll read all 10? No. I don't think I'll read all 10. It pains me to say that. I want to read all 10. The problem is I'm very much a mood reader, and so if I have to be in the right mood to read certain books, and I think I set myself up too for like books that I really think I'm gonna like. I'm like, okay, you have to be in the right mood for that, because what if you're in the wrong mood and you force yourself to read it and then you hate it? It's hard. I think I'll read. See, here's the other thing too, is like that Stasia Stark book, the Kingdom of Lies series. I started the 2nd book. That's not on this list, but I want to finish that series by the end of the year. And we only have like 5 more weeks before the end of the year. That being said, I do have 3 days of uninterrupted reading time, which I'm very excited about. And then I have all next week off of work. And then I have the last 2 weeks of the year off work too. So I have a lot of time to be able to read. Yeah, like I said, I would like to get to 10, but I'd like to get to all 10, but if I'm being completely honest, I probably will not. I'd be very shocked if I did. Anyway, we'll see. I hope they're all 5 stars, but that's the other thing too, is like, if I cram these 10 books into the end of the year, I would be shocked if they all were 5 stars, because as of today, I'm actually 4 books away from my 2024 reading goal. I have read this is embarrassing. I have read 246 books, and I think I have like a less than 10% 5-star ratio. I'll have to look. I'll put it up on the screen how many books I've read and how many books. I know I've read 246, but I'll look up how many have actually been 5 stars, and then also how many have been like 4.5 and then 4 stars. I think if I include like 4 stars and up, I have a